The title which I selected was Zoroastrian Contribution to Celebrating Interfaith Coexistence. Primarily, those amongst you or those amongst us who comes from Iran, like the Zoroastrians do, where we originate from, just recently, I think late last month, in Iran and in the rest of the world, they celebrated what was called Cyrus Day. Cyrus, or Cyrus the Great, as is known very much in Iran and amongst the Zoroastrians. He was the founder of the Iranian nation state, and we're talking about 500 before the Common Era. And just on the 29th of October, the Persians or the Iranian forces marched into what was then the Babylonian Empire and conquered it. However, history informs us that the way it was done was through strategic sort of intervention and with covert action, whereby when the Persian forces entered the city, it was very much done as a minimal force as opposed to the various destruction that goes into when you conquer. And remarkably, the Iranians in the ancient world, yes, it was a violent place, let's make no bones about it, but relatively they were seen as less sort of destructive as their predecessors when they were going expanding their territory. Why do I mention this particular episode? And is this that Cyrus and the Iranians, within a space of, say, about 50 years, from a very tiny kingdom, I would say something like Wessex, to give you a relative analogy in Britain, Cyrus had not only was king of England, king of the United Kingdom, king of Europe, to give you that expansion of territory. And the Persian Empire stretched from what today is the borders of China in the east, to the west, to the Bosphorus, which is modern-day Turkey, going into the Balkans, coming down south, which today is sort of Palestine, Israel, into the Yemen, and into sort of what today is Pakistan, Punjab in India as such. And for the first time, the Iranians, who were practitioners of the Zoroastrian faith, encountered people of other faiths and other communities. And the challenge was, what do you do with them? How do we, yes, we are now conquerors, we are empire builders, how do we hang on? And Cyrus came out with this policy of very much live and let live, which was, you are most welcome to follow your own practices, customs and faith. However, the caveat was, obviously, you have to ensure that you don't challenge our supremacy. And this was, in the ancient world, one of the very early examples of interfaith coexistence. It is very much, you can see from the Hebrew Old Testament, or the Hebrew Scriptures, where Cyrus the Great is known as Cyrus the Anointed, quite a rare sort of tribute to a Gentile. But later on, when the Zoroastrians in Iran became themselves a minority faith, we're talking about 1,000 years afterwards, by the 7th century of the Common Era. We went on the fringes, and eventually a group of my ancestors left Iran and came to India, and where we happened to settle on the west coast of India, what today is Gujarat. And here again, I mean, those amongst you are familiar with what we call the Parsi community, i.e. those amongst us, the Zoroastrians who come from India, or which are called Parsis, or as the Hindus call them, i.e. Persians. There, we had to explain, because being a minority, the story goes that we landed on the west coast of India in boatloads, men, women, and children, and we wanted to stay. The locals looking at us saying, hang on a minute, these looks dodgy people. They are not only sort of wearing different from us, different clothes, they look different. They're also carrying arms. What do they want? So sooner the local king dispatched an emissary and said to the people who come by the boatloads, he said, what do you guys want? And we said, okay, we want a bit of refuge. And they said, sorry, can't help you. We'll give you the provisions, we'll give you water, but I think it's better you guys move on. We do not, we are not keen on having different kind of people because it'll destabilize our community. And the story goes, it was done through sort of actions, and whereby the emissary sort of brought a pot full of milk, indicating that there's no room. It's time for you guys to move on. Although India was not as populated as it is today, but nevertheless, there's still problems of difference and other is a very old issue. And the Zoroastrian leader sort of requested some sugar crystals and put the sugar in the water and put in the milk, and thereby indicating that, look, let us stay, we request stay, and we will be with you in coexistence. Yes, we'll be different, but like the sugar, you will taste a difference in your milk. The local king agreed, and thereby we were allowed, my ancestors were allowed to stay in India. The reason why I say this is, again, is part of interfaith coexistence, because if it wasn't for the Hindu king letting us stay, today, it's improbable that I'll be speaking in front of you as a practitioner of Zoroastrianism. We would all have been fossils. So in a sense, what Satish said to a degree, that yes, I accept that for the fact from the Hindu perspective, they feel that we are still not perfect from the interfaith side of the point of view. But at times, in many ways, the Hindus have been quite pluralistic in their outlook. And we are sort of eternally grateful for them to allow us to stay in India. The point what I'm making is this, that again, the importance was there for us to then explain, to ensure that their host community did not see us as a threat. Quickly, just coming back to the United Kingdom, same issue. Interfaith here, we've been sort of participating, reminds me of my presidential predecessor, Dadabhai Naoroji, back in 1893 at the World Parliament of Religions, again participating in this first interfaith international conference in recent times. And it reminds me here why I bring this particular episode is because the association which I represent, called the Zoroastrian Trust Funds of Europe, which happens to be the oldest Asian or Indian religious voluntary organization in this country, we actually started to participate actively in modern times in interfaith, was very much back in the early 1990s. And one of our first public sort of engagement on interfaith happened to be in this very building in 1993 for the World Parliament of Religions, which the Brahma Kumaris that time did, which was in the main auditorium. So in a sense where we're today is coming back full circle, and it sort of reminds me that I was coming today just now, because there's quite a challenge coming here today because of all the traffic and all that. And it gave me a bit of time to contemplate on what it was like today. So in a sense, it was déjà vu. And thank you very much for inviting me today.
Thank you, Malcolm. Thank you all.